Photography composition tips and techniques. How I take photos. Hi, and a very warm welcome to episode 200 of the Photography Explained podcast. I'm your host, Rick. Hi, and in each episode, I will try to explain one photographic thing to you in plain English in less than 27 minutes-ish, without the irrelevant details. Yes, really. I'm a professionally qualified photographer based in England with a lifetime of photographic experience, which I share with you in my splendid podcast. Okay, here is the answery bit. The single most important thing we can do to improve our photography is to think about what we're taking photos of before we take them. We need to take the time to get the best composition every time we take a photo. The success or otherwise of any photo starts and ends with what is in the photo. Yes, really. Photography composition is what you include in a photo, what the light's doing, and how the elements within the composition relate to each other. And that, dear listener, is the answery bit. In this episode, I'm going to tell you some things that you can do to help you take better photos. What is not to love, eh? But before I do that, let me get the harsh reality out of the way. And it is this. And it's about your photo, dear listener. That's your photo. No one cares about anything other than what they are looking at. What is in your photo, that is. Now, I know it's a horrible thought, but this is the harsh reality. I've spoken about this a lot. I'll come on to that very shortly, but no one cares about anything else. No one cares. All they care about is what they're looking at. It's the photo in front of their eyes, okay? We need to remember that every time we take a photo. And this is why composition is so important and is the place where we need to focus, pun intended, more efforts than anywhere else. I know we need to get things technically right, but if it's a rubbish composition, who cares how technically fantastic it is? Okay, so how do we get the best compositions? Right, well, I touched on it very briefly. There are some things I've covered recently that I don't want to repeat them here. None of us want that, do we? No, we don't, Rick. But I'm going to point you in the direction of a couple of related episodes. Episode 197, How to Take Fewer Photos But Better Photos in 2025. Open brackets with my one photo rule, close brackets. Episode 195, Why Do I Have So Many Rubbish Photos? Open brackets and why it's okay and what I'm doing about it, close brackets. And episode 186, Get Out Taking Photos More But Take Fewer Photos. Obviously there's a trend there of having a bracketed addition to a title, which I hadn't spotted that trend, so I'll keep an eye on that one. Yes, I talk a lot about taking better photos because it's the number one way you and I can improve our photography. And I absolutely believe that. And this is a talky episode, so here is the talky bit. Let's start at the beginning. What are you taking a photograph of? Yes, this is the starting point. What are you taking a photograph of? What is the main subject of a photo? Every photo needs a main subject, be that a view, a building, a person, or a very small object. Now, I was going to start listing very small objects there, but we don't need that, do we? You know what very small objects are, don't you? So yeah, your starting point is what you're photographing. What's the main subject? Now, if you don't know this, what chance do you stand of getting even a half-decent photo that other people will find interesting? Virtually no chance, dear listener. Virtually no chance. Okay, so how do we go about this? How do we approach it? Well, let me introduce you to my 3 photography superpowers, and they are walking around, looking, and thinking. Yes, dear listener, walking around, looking, and thinking. This is where the good stuff starts for me. Rather than just taking photos of anything in front of me, I do this. I walk around, I look, and I think. And that's without my camera in hand. And I really do this. See, what I used to do, I used to go to a place and I'd photograph anything and everything and without much thought, which is how I ended up with so many rubbish photos in my Lightroom catalogue. I've spoken about this on many occasions. But not anymore. Okay then, so I'm walking and looking. What am I looking for? Well, I've been thinking about how to explain this because I started writing this and I got completely stuck, and then I had a brainwave, fortunately. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how I take photos of a variety of things. And this most excellent idea, it resulted in a slight change to the title and a much better episode, so I'm happy with that. Phew. Let's start with how do I take photos of a building for a client? Well, I'm going to have a brief. What photos are needed. I'm going to know what the photos are for. I'm going to know how many photos are needed. And I might have a shot list. So this makes things a lot easier. And my style is my style. People know what the photos are going to look like. And you can see numerous examples of work on my website, rickmcavoyphotography.com. Quick plug there, nice one, Rick. And that's not in the script. So I know what I'm doing, which is a great start. I know what I'm producing, and I know how I'm going to take and process the images to get the look that I already produced. Because if somebody doesn't want the photos that look like all the other photos I've taken, I'm going to do something different. But 99 times out of 100, I just do what I've done before, and people are happy with that, which is nice. Now, yeah, there will be job-specific stuff. Each job, it has its own nuances. And that is the first use of the word nuances on the podcast, I'm pretty sure. Now, for me, one of my big variables on every building that I photograph is it's where the building is and its orientation. And also the time of year I'm taking the photos. And not in the script, but equally important to me is the time I've got to take the photos. Sometimes I've got an hour, 2 hour slot and I have to get in and out in that time, which gives me a lot less flexibility. I often don't have the luxury of being able to pick a time to take the photos. I'm given the time and I have to work with it. That's just my reality. So yeah, building, location and orientation, the big factors for me that I have to deal with. Now, sometimes I can deal with them in advance through planning, and on most occasions I just do the best with what I've got. But the thought process is the same. During my appointment, I will have established what time of day is best to take photos, where I've got a choice and the time to take them, obviously, because the sun moves throughout the day and the orientation and what is important will dictate the best time. As in, what is the most important elevation typically? Because if I can get that one with the sun on it and at an angle to give some shadows and some depth and what have you, that's great. Now, if I'm working for an architect, I've got a bit more flexibility. If I'm doing a real estate shoot, I'm just getting in there and taking the photos whatever time. Different clients have different needs. That's very important to remember. But whatever the case, my starting point is that I know what the subject matter is. I know when I'm going to take the photos. I know what they're for. I know what they're going to look like. So I'm starting from a very strong position. Now I'm going to skip gear prep, which is one for another episode. But my gear will be properly prepped, always. So this is what I do on the day of the shoot, or shot, as my script says. I'm just going to change that. Bear with. Right, that's that little typo dealt with. This is what I do on the day of the shoot. I will turn up at the location, and the first thing I will do is walk around and have a good old look and a good old think. And this is without my camera. Yep, I'm looking and thinking. I'm working out how I'm going to approach the shoot, knowing what I already know, which I've just told you. So what am I looking for? Well, let's use the front of the building as an example, because that's going to be the first photograph that I take. So the light is important. Where's the light coming from? Where is the sun? And how does that interact with the front of the building? Now, if it's overcast, which it often is here in England, I'm not going to think about this too much, because what I've got is I've got an even, soft, diffused overhead light. It's the sun through cloud, and it's actually a very effective light. So it's not a bad thing, and it makes life a lot easier because it doesn't really matter what time I do what. But if the sun's out, this wonderful three-directional light, it will impact the external photos. Like I say, if I'm taking photos for an architect, it's more of a consideration than if I'm doing a real estate shoot. And that's not demeaning real estate shoots. It's just that different clients, I've said it before, I'll say it again, have got different needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how to make the best use of this free light source, and that will influence when I take which shot. That's the quick bit of thinking I need to do, which will determine the sequence. What I like to do is photograph a building in a logical sequence, starting with the front and going around the sides in a logical order, and then doing the insides, because it makes it easier when I come to editing the photos, and I know that I've covered everything, and I'm trying to tell the story of a building, believe it or not. That's what I'm trying to do. So where the sun is, it can influence that timing. And how does this relate to composition? Well, part of getting the best composition is to get the best light for each photo that you take. It's completely relevant. Make best use of the light. If you got a choice of when you can take photos, make that light work the best for your photos, because it's free and it can make a massive difference. If the light's rubbish, you can end up with a rubbish photo. If the light's amazing, you can end up with an amazing photo. But it depends what you're taking a photograph of, who for, and all that good stuff. Getting back to the subject. For the front of the building, I'm going to start off with a straight-on shot. Now, everything I'm saying here, it's assuming I've got unimpeded access, by the way. So in the first photo, I will stand in the middle of the building, and my camera's level. It's completely level. I don't tilt the camera back to fit the building in unless I have to. That's why I use a 17mm lens, so I don't need to. And if that means there's more foreground in the composition, that's fine, because I want to capture the building level and vertical. I want to get everything as accurate as I can in camera. And I'm going to use the central focus point only, and I'm going to make sure that that is slap bang in the middle of that face of the building. And then I'm going to look for an even area between the edge of the building and the edges of a photo. This won't necessarily be the case with the top and the bottom, but left and right of the building should be central, so the gap should be even, because it needs to look central in the photo. It's very important. This is technical composition I'm talking about now. And I'll get as tight as I can do when composing, as tight as what I'm photographing will allow. And I'm not going to do that by zooming in. I'm going to do that by moving forward or back to get the right composition, because I want to take every photo at 17mm. I want everything to be consistent. And I need to get the boundary on either side of the building and anything relevant to the front. And if there's an aerial on the roof, I want all of that, because if it's there, I need to capture it. I don't want to cut it off. And if there's trees in the back garden, I want all of those in. I might actually, if there's a load of trees that I want to include, I might take a second photo of the front, including them. The first photo is the main building, but nothing on the building is cut off. It's the building complete as I see it. Yeah, this is a technical exercise, and I'm going to take the time to get the most technically correct composition I can. This isn't art, this isn't anything sophisticated. This photo is a technical photo of the front of a building for a specific need. The composition has to be so correct that there's no cropping or correcting of verticals or horizontals needed. The composition shows the building as it is to its best, but it's technically correct. It's no good if the building's leaning over or anything, is it? It's got to be bang on. So I get the composition bang on, and it saves me time later in processing, which I'm happy with. And once I've got that first composition, I've got that first photo, I take it, then I'll move on to the next shot. And for me, that is going to be the front elevation and also the wall to the left-hand side. Now, it might not be 45 degrees on. It might just be, I don't know, 60 degrees, say, from the front. So I'm showing the side wall. I'm showing the depth of the building. But the composition of the first photo with the gaps either side, top and bottom, I want that the same in the next photo. And I'm photographing the middle of the subject matter again. That's where I'm focusing. My composition is centered around that, and that's my focus point too. Didn't mention that before. I got the focus point, but I'm focusing on the facade of the building because that's my subject matter. I'm using f8, so depth of field isn't a problem. I might need to think about it a bit for these shots where I've got the two elevations, but f8, 17mm full frame, it's normally fine. Okay. Oh yeah, and all the photos are taken in landscape orientation unless I have to change to portrait. Or if a client has asked me for more portrait orientation photos, which is getting more the case these days. There's been a change in, obviously, where people view photos of buildings. I mean, for an architect, not as much as real estate. Right, I'm going to stop there because the point is this. I get the composition of the first photo as perfect as I can, and then I repeat this for every other external photo. They need to look similar. They need to be a coherent set. They need to be taken with the same composition, okay? That's the externals of a building. That's how I approach it. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be quite a quick process. And if you think about it, I've got some fixed things there which I'm replicating from one photo to the next. I'm focusing in the middle of what I'm photographing. I've got an equal space either side. I've got an equal space top and bottom. I'm not changing my camera settings. So it's about getting the camera in the perfect position to get the composition. That is the work in this. That's where the thought comes in. Right, for interiors, well, I'm normally after 2 photos of each room. One looking into the room and one looking from the room towards the wall with the doors and picking up the room it connects to. This is about showing how the rooms relate to each other. It's the story of the internal space. That's what I'm trying to convey. Again, I'm using a 17mm lens on a full-frame camera, so my composition is going to capture all of a room in 2 images if possible. For smaller rooms, I'm going to use portrait orientation, but only when I have to. And we're talking toilets, utility spaces, cupboards, and stairs, obviously. My compositions are normally taken from the door looking in, getting as much of the room in and technically bang on. Verticals and horizontals have to be perfect in every composition. I've not got the same constraints of space either side because each room's different, so it's recording each room in a similar way if I can do. If a room's big enough that I need to take a third photo, or it's got features in it that mean I need to take a third photo, or a fourth, or a fifth, or a sixth, whatever it takes, that's what I'll do. This is how I approach it. My photos have to be technically excellent, and this starts and ends with the composition. Yeah, I know it's not a creative process, but this is what I do. My Apple Watch is ready to collect on Tuesday. I was going to phone them this afternoon. That's one less thing to do. Good news. Yeah, my watch had a few problems. Right, how do I take photos of a building for me? It won't surprise you to hear this. I walk around, I look, I think, and I see if there's anything interesting. And if there isn't, I won't bother taking any photos, and that's fine, I'll move on. I'm not just going to photograph a building just because it's there, just because I'm stood in front of it. If there's nothing interesting, I'm going to move on. So I'm not that sad, which I thought I was, or obsessed come to that, so that's reassuring. I need something interesting to capture, and I do this by looking around and taking my time. This is for me, after all. This is what I love to do, and I absolutely love doing this. I'm going to look at what the light's doing and if it's creating anything of interest. I'm going to look what's around a building. Are there any interesting relationships with adjacent buildings or anything else around buildings? It could be anything, I don't know. And when I move around, I'll see how the various things that I'm looking at interact, and it really does make a massive difference to a composition. This walking around and looking at how things relate, that's how you create compositions from what's there. And I'm going to look closely to see if there's any interesting details. And then I'm going to go up close and see what's inside. And when I find something interesting, I'm going to look even closer for that one composition. Yes, I am. I'm taking photos for myself. I'm only after one photo of that building or part of a building. One photo of something that I find interesting and that I think other people will find interesting. Don't take boring photos because nobody else will be interested. Remember what I said at the beginning. All anyone cares about is what's in your photo. And if it's boring, it's a boring photo. You're never going to change that. Only after I've gone through all this will I raise my camera and look through the viewfinder. Yes, really. And doing this, it helps me to frame the photo. Of course it does. And this is one of the beauties of taking photos with a camera to me. Looking through the viewfinder, because it isolates everything else and it allows me to concentrate on that composition. And I'm going to try different focal lengths. I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to zoom out, I'm going to move around to tweak and refine what I'm looking at. And once I'm happy, I'm going to take one photo. Okay, 3 if I'm using auto exposure bracketing. AEB if you find those 3 words too much to say in full. And then I'm going to check what I've got. Sorry about that. And if I'm happy, I'm going to move on and find something else interesting to photograph. And if I'm not happy, I'll work out why, and I'll take another photo. And I'll keep on repeating the process until I'm happy. And if I'm not happy by the end of that process, I'll just move on. It's fine. I'll find something that I like. And I don't delete photos I wasn't happy with in camera. I'm going to do that when I sort the photos when I get home. Now, the screens on my cameras, they're pretty small, and I'm quite old and my eyes aren't great, and I don't want to delete the wrong photo. It's much safer if I do it on a big monitor in a controlled environment at home, isn't it? Yes, it is, Rick. Right, how I photograph a sunrise. I'm going to be even quicker this time. Right then, and now for something completely different, and if you get that reference, let me know. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, apologies. You can always ask, and you're probably younger than me. Okay, sunrise. I'm going to go to the location I'm thinking of during the day. I'm going to have a good old look around. I'm going to use an app to work out exactly where the sun will rise. And at what time, of course, because that's quite critical, isn't it? I'm going to decide what I want in the foreground, midground and background. I'm going to decide where I want the sun to be in the composition as it pops up over the horizon. I'm going to take a photo then, during the day before I'm taking the sunrise photo, and I'm going to see if the content is what I'm after. I need to visualize what I've got with the sun popping up wherever I want it to. If I'm not happy, I'm going to change where I am, what I'm looking at, the focal length, all that good stuff. Then I'm going to take another photo. If I'm happy, I'm done. If not, repeat the process until I'm happy. I'm then going to take a photograph of the very same composition with my phone. I'm also going to photograph exactly where my camera is. If there's a distinct feature like a rock, I'm going to use this as a reference point, or I might place a stick or something in the ground where I want to take the photo. Whatever it is, I'm going to find some way to record where I need to put my tripod to get the composition that I like the next morning. Because it's going to be dark, isn't it? And then the next morning, I'm going to return well before sunrise, and I'm going to take one photo with that exact composition before sunrise, and another one photo as the sun rises over the horizon. See, I only want, well, my script says I only want one photo of the sunrise, but sorry, I want 2. That's 2 different moments. One is the light before sunrise. One is with the sun just breaking off the horizon. That's the moment I want. Not saying that's the moment you should take. That's the one I want. That's what I want to capture, and that's it. And if I'm on holiday, which is often the case with sunrises, because that's the thing I love to do, I'm going to do all this, and the next day I'm going to either take the photo or I'm just going to sit on my backside and watch the sunrise. What I prefer to do is find a composition. The next morning, watch the sunrise and enjoy it. That might influence how I take the photo the next morning. And then the morning after that, because I've got time, because I'm on holiday and it's fine, I'll get that photo. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. The point is this. I am planning the composition in advance. I'm thinking about all of this before I take that photo. Okay, that's me done. How do I photograph a sunset? Well, same as the sunrise in reverse. Sort of, you know what I mean. But if I'm on holiday, I'll probably be sat in a bar somewhere having a drink with Mrs. M rather than taking photos. That's a much more enjoyable thing to do. And that's what I do on holiday. Okay, one last one. How do I photograph a holiday destination for a website? Yes, this is composition related. Do not worry. I went to the amazing Greek island of Santorini on a photographic treat some years ago, thanks to Mrs. M. I had 5 days to take photos, 5 sunrises, 5 sunsets, and whatever I wanted in between. Now, how did I approach this? It was Santorini. It's a wonderful Greek island. It's a volcano. It's just got everything. Well, this is what I did. I did no research at all. I deliberately did no research at all. When we were there, I got out and I walked around and I found stuff. Now, this was some years ago. This was 7 years ago. That 2017 it was. And I think that was the start of the walking, looking and thinking bit. See, I didn't have a plan. I just went out and I found stuff. Now, you might think this is ludicrous, but had I researched the island, I would have ended up with the same photos everyone else has taken. And that is not for me. Not at all. What I found is that if I research something, I know what it is I'm looking to photograph, and I don't want to do that. I want to find the things to photograph myself. So rather than doing a bit of research, I don't do any research. I know what I'm going to. I know what the island looks like. Of course I do. I know what the weather's going to be like. I've been to Greece many, many times. But I don't research the island. I just get off my backside. I'm equipped for this, and I get out and I find things, and I absolutely love doing it. So I think this was the beginning of this walking and looking thing. So in Santorini, I'd walk for hours and hours trying to find interesting things, which, yep, it was the beginning of me taking fewer and better photos because the possibilities were endless. That's not true, because the next line says, how many photos did I take over those 5 days? And in Lightroom, I've got 2,795 photos in 5 days. It's nothing like what I do these days. If I was doing that now, if I had 5 days in Santorini to take photos, I reckon a maximum 200 photos. I had loads more examples, but I'm going to stop there because there's a point to this. They're all the same. I go through the same process for whatever I take photos of. I walk around, I look, I think, I look at what the light's doing. I observe how the various elements of a composition relate to each other and how these things change when I change my position. And only then will I look through my camera viewfinder to refine the composition by excluding everything else and adjusting the focal length, going nearer, going further back, all that good stuff. Yep, there are some differences. I have to adapt my compositions depending if the photos are for me or for a client or for any particular end use. So it's the same but different. The principle's the same. I sometimes have more constraints depending on who the photos are for. I've got lots more to say on this, but I haven't got enough time in this episode. So the next episode is going to focus even more on composition. And it's going to be more on the what is a good composition. I need to cover that to give you some more help. So I'm going to move on to what if I use a phone to take photos. Well, you can apply everything I say to taking photos with your phone, especially if you don't have a camera. But you don't have the viewfinder to help you cut out everything but what you're taking a photo of. And that is the big difference to me between taking photos with a phone or a camera. And that is why I prefer taking photos with my camera. What do? I write and I talk about this stuff a lot, don't I? In this bit, I want to talk about that and my podcast briefly, which I trust is okay with you. I started this podcast in October 2020, blimey. I've been a big podcast listener for years, but I couldn't find a podcast that explained photography things how I wanted them explaining. So I thought I'm going to come up with my own podcast, and that is how my small but perfectly formed podcast came to be. And here I am now, 200 episodes later, and I'm loving doing this more than ever. And my audience is growing with every episode, which is utterly splendid. So I like to say hello, dear listener, wherever you are in the 156 countries where my small but perfectly formed podcast has been downloaded. Yes, 156 countries. That really blows my mind. Sorry, that was just a quick thing I wanted to say about the podcast. And that's me celebrating 200 episodes of my podcast in a typically understated British way. And there's another thing that I need to do going forwards. I'm spending so much time writing and talking about photos, but nowhere near enough time taking them myself. So this is going to be a big change for 2025. I'm going to get out more taking photos. I'm going to apply what I tell you to myself. I'm going to take some more photos, and I've started doing it. January's been a good month. I've taken a nice variety of things, and that's really kick-started my enthusiasm for taking photos, and it's given me more to talk about, so that's all good. That's what I do. That's what I'm going to do. And yeah, that was a lot quicker than I expected. Right, some thoughts from the last episode. Well, one thing I want to talk about here, subfolders in Lightroom. That could get confusing. I've had a good old think about this, and do you know what? I'm getting rid of them. I don't need them anymore. Photos are going to go into the folder. I'm going to select pics. I'm going to select rejects. I'm going to delete the rejects. And that might leave some photos that I haven't picked. I'm going to go through them again and again and again until all I've got is pics. I'm not going to have unflagged. So I'm going to keep on going through this process till all I've got is pics. Photos that I value, photos that I'm prepared to invest some time in editing. So I don't need these folders, and that's a real big improvement for me. I'm quite happy with that, and I've started applying this principle to the folders I'm sorting out as part of my catalogue culling exercise. So subfolders, bye, you're a thing of the past. A quick plug for me and what I do. Well, why not? If I can't plug myself on my own podcast, where can I, dear listener? So you found this podcast, why not check out the podcast website, photographyexplainedpodcast.com. And I have another website, rickmcavoyphotography.com, where I write blog posts about my photographs of buildings and lots of other good stuff. I've also got a courses page, /courses, where you can find my course, How to Become a Real Estate Photographer. And you can also find me on YouTube talking about my podcast and my blog, all sorts of photography stuff. Just type my name in and you'll find me soon enough. And if you want to receive a weekly email from me, and why wouldn't you? Just fill in the box on any of my websites, and every Friday you'll read what I'm thinking about photography related in your inbox, 3 p.m. time where I'm sat. Right, that's the self-promotion over. Oh yeah, if you've got a question you'd like me to answer, or if you just want to say hi, email me, sales@rickmcavoyphotography.co.uk, shorter email address, work in progress. Or visit the podcast website, and you can now text me from the podcast feed as well. Whichever way you get in touch, it's always lovely to hear from you, dear listeners. Okay, this episode was brought to you by a cheese and pickle sandwich and a bag of salt and vinegar crisps. Yes, it really was. Which I consumed before I settled down in my homemade, acoustically cushioned recording emporium. I've been Rick McAvoy. Thanks again very much for listening to my small but perfectly formed podcast. It says here. And for giving me 27 minutes of your valuable time. After I've edited out the mistakes and other bad stuff, this episode will be about, 33, 35 minutes long. We will find out. Thanks for listening. Take care. Stay safe. Cheers from me, Rick.